And I want to share a couple of stories of Jesus' interaction with people. But before I do that, let me introduce a little bit of a bit to that. Some of you would have tried these. Anybody ever tried these VR goggles? You just put your phone in there and you can watch videos, and they're amazing. You can. I've got nothing in there, so I'll have to pretend this. But I could put this on. Does that look fetching? And I could be transported to a roller coaster, and I can move my head around, and I can see the roller coaster going up and down the hills, and not the hills, the tracks, doing the loops, and it sort of conjures up something of a little bit of the feelings and emotion of experiencing it for itself, but it's not real. It's virtual, but it's not really reality. And there's a lot of people that's how they do their Christian faith. That there is an aspect of experience, but it's living off other people's experiences. It's living off someone else's story of someone else's interaction. And God never designed Christianity to be that. He designed for you and I to have a first contact, real relationship with God, which today we've seen people who have experienced that go in the waters of baptism. And there are many other ways in today's world that people have those almost real experiences. I remember a number of years ago, my wife and I, we went on safari to Namibia, and we had a wonderful time. Africa's an amazing nation. Just gorgeous place and amazing sunsets. The suns were amazing on the horizon. And we saw a whole range of animals. And I'd like to say that we saw some of them really close up. And there were some that we did. But a lot of them, we were at a safe distance. And the safe distance was close enough for a pair of binoculars to allow us to see what was in front of us. But we were able to stay enough of a distance so that we wouldn't get eaten by them. So it was like a bit of a common sense, natural sense of fear that kept your distance, and binoculars sort of took us there. And I know some people, they look at the Christian faith from a distance, and they look through binoculars and they sort of think, it looks great, but I'm not sure if I can really trust it and get close. And then we've got a holiday plan for later in the summer, and where we're going, we've been on TripAdvisor. Anybody ever use TripAdvisor? So TripAdvisor is amazing because you get to see other people's experiences of the place that you're going. So we've shortlisted a bunch of eating places in this town where we're going. And basically, you see the photographs of the food that they were about to eat. Some of them, they've got their arm around the waiter and they have a photo or a bit of a selfie with them. This waiter was really friendly. And they talk about their experience, and then they give a star rating. Basically, if a restaurant has had multiple visitors on TripAdvisor and there's only a 1 star, you don't go there. You go where the stars are, and you follow other people's experience, other people's recommendation. And it's quite possible to feel like you've almost been there by reading those reviews. I feel like I've tasted the food, and I feel like I've experienced some of the hospitality. We've got a week planned out of almost really all the different places we're going to visit based on other people's recommendations. But I've not been there. And it's different. Knowing about it, hearing the stories of other people, hearing about other people's experiences is not it. You can experience it for yourself. And I want to take you into an amazing story this morning that we find in the Gospel of John chapter 8. And the words to this story are going to appear on the screen as well, so you can read along with me. And John chapter 8 verses 2 says this: At dawn, he, that's Jesus, appeared again in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group, and they said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and he said to them, Let any one of you that is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and he wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." This is an amazing story. This was a really busy place. This was like hanging out in one of the busiest places in the city. And there were people coming and going, people on their way to the temple, people engaging in all sorts of activities. There would have been a whole range of things taking place in that moment. And Jesus was gathering a crowd. They just followed him because they heard stories of miracles and amazing stories about things he was saying and doing. So it was even busier than normal. And this crowd were gathering around him as he taught them. And suddenly, these group of guys, I imagine they sort of threw this woman at Jesus' feet. And they weren't really respectful to her. And they wanted to publicly humiliate her. But really, the issue wasn't about her. They were trying to use this woman to try and trick Jesus in some way. And so they threw this lady down in front of Jesus and said, "This woman has been caught doing something that the law says is not right. She's been caught in the act of adultery." And Jesus, his response is amazing. Because I think a lot of people don't engage with church and with the gospel today because they think that they're too bad to approach Jesus. And here's a scenario when someone is throwing someone who has done something wrong at the feet of Jesus, and the people gathered around were expecting that Jesus would have a go at her. But actually, it was these guys, these men, and they were fueled by their religion, they were fueled by their testosterone, they were fueled by their desire to trick Jesus. And that fueling brought them to a place where this lady was now in front of Jesus. What did Jesus do? Amazing. He just gets down. It was obviously a very dusty road, dusty path where they were. And it doesn't tell us what he wrote, but it says that he wrote something in the ground. It was the first of 2 times he wrote something in the ground in this story. The first thing he wrote, the crowd still stayed there. Now, there have been lots of speculation over the years as to what Jesus may have written. Some people surmise that he wrote a verse from the Old Testament, Hosea 4:14, which says this. It does say something. It says, imagine if this is what Jesus wrote. "I will not punish your daughters when they turn to prostitution, nor your daughters-in-law when they commit adultery, because the men themselves consort with harlots and sacrifice with shrine prostitutes. A people without understanding will come to ruin." Now, I don't know if that's what Jesus wrote, but a lot of people surmise that may have been something along the lines that he wrote. And I wouldn't put it past Jesus because that's pretty confrontational. You know, the people that Jesus was the strongest with were the religious people. And here we got this group of guys saying, "This woman's terrible, this woman, she should be punished." And Jesus, I'm sure he would have had no problem in pointing out to them that they were not without fault. And by quoting something they would have been very familiar with. And you can imagine just this awkward silence in the room. Almost one of those moments like we saw this week where Donald Trump tells all the world leaders off about their contributions or their lack of contribution to NATO. And we just see this sort of awkward moment in the room where they stay still, but it feels a bit weird and it feels awkward. And then Jesus gets down again. And this gathered crowd, this frantic environment, this woman who's just feels so bad about herself that she can't even look in the eyes of those who are around her. We read that Jesus takes his finger and he begins to write something else in the ground. Again, we don't know definitely what he wrote, but there are quite a number of people who would surmise that Jesus began to write down the names of the men who were in the crowd that had engaged in acts of adultery. And they, very embarrassed, very full of shame, knew they couldn't argue with this. And they just turned around, and one by one they began to drift off. Until all that was left at this scene, this once busy scene, is now a quiet scene. And there's the lady, and there's Jesus. This lady doesn't need to be told that her life has got failure and shame. She doesn't need to know that. She knows it. And then there's Jesus, who seems to know everything about everybody's life. And the one man who the Bible tells us was completely without any offense of himself, he asks her a question. He says, "Where have your accusers gone? Where are those people that brought you to me?" Of course, they'd gone. And then Jesus says these words. "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Now go and leave your life of sin." These men who once had stones turned away because they knew that their lives were in need themselves. And I love the compassion and the love of Jesus. In fact, you know that famous verse, the most famous verse in the Bible is John 3:16, which says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life." It goes on to say in the next verse, Jesus didn't come into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. And this story captures that. Jesus was the only person who had the merit and the right to be able to say, actually, you have messed up. Leave me. And yet, he didn't come to condemn. He came to heal and to restore. And as that song we sang earlier on, to make all things new. The greatest miracle that many people in this room have experienced, and many millions across the world have experienced, is that Jesus has made all things new. That he's taken the shame of our past. He's taken those wrong things that have been formed in our life that I reckon that many people don't really feel they can engage with God or church because they feel like, I'm just not good enough. And that, in a sense, is true. Because just like that woman, Jesus didn't defend her guilt. He didn't say, "Oh, it's okay, it doesn't really matter." He said, "Neither do I condemn you. Have a new start." And Jesus says to people all over the earth, "Neither do I condemn you. Have a new start. Have a new start." When they went in the water earlier on, they didn't go 75% in the water. They didn't go 50% in the water. Their Christian experience is not a virtual reality headset. They've not just read about other people's experiences on TripAdvisor and said, "I'm interested, I'm intrigued. Please, can you partially baptize me?" They went all the way in the water because they said, "I am all in for God." And when they came out of the water, they say, "I'm all out for Jesus." All in, all out. You can't sort of slide in. You can't just have just a pick and mix approach to Christianity. You can't just put on the headset on a Sunday and just say, "Oh, this is going to be my church, my Christian experience." Jesus, he takes everything and makes all things new. He transforms our lives. We're not told anything about this lady beyond this story, but I'm sure this lady's life was changed forever. There's another story in Luke 7 that tells another story of someone else who had lived a bit of a bad life. And we read, the scenario is this. You imagine that you had a guest of honor come into your home. It was somebody who you felt so honored to have them come into your home to see you. You pull out the best china. You know that set that you've got in the cupboard for special occasions that no one's allowed to use? You pull it out because this is a guest of honor. That you spring clean the house. You mow the lawn. You get everything ready. You even hoover to the level of the cobwebs in the corner of the ceiling. It's that serious. You've been in your wardrobe and you've got the best clothing and you're ready for the occasion. You've made sure your plugins are topped up and the house is looking and smelling spick and span. You've been to the butcher's and you've bought the best joint of meat. Sorry, vegetarians. And you are just prepared for this moment and you are so looking forward to the honor of their arrival. And they knock on the door and you greet them and you welcome them and they come into the home and then they take their seat at the table and you offer them an aperitif and some drinks, and you are loving this, and you don't realize you've left the door open, and in off the street walks somebody who has a bit of a bad reputation. And they just come and make their way into your dining area. And they just gather at the feet of your guest of honor, and they begin weeping at his feet, and his feet are dripping with the tears. And then begins to wipe his feet with her hair. And then she has this really, really expensive jar of perfume that is probably worth at least a year's wages. She breaks it open. And you are just offended. How dare they ruin my moment? How dare they come and bring their stink in my home? How dare they interfere with my well-manicured, brilliantly executed plan? How dare they? And we pick up the story of an offense here. Let's read it from verse 38 of Luke 7. It says, as she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. And when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. And Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, he said. He said, two people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back. So he forgave the debts of both of them. Now which of them will love him more? Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. You've judged correctly, Jesus said. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You didn't give me any water for my feet. But she wet my feet with her tears, and she wiped them with her hair. You didn't give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You didn't put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven loves little. Then Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. The other guests began to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? Do you know God has called his people to be a people that are so all in for God that we're all out with who he is? We read in Galatians 2:20, Apostle Paul wrote these words. He said, I have been crucified with Christ, and it's no longer I that live, but it's Christ who lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Do you know when we give our lives to Jesus, it's that we die to the ambitions of this world, we die to the things of this world, and we say, I want to know this love and this compassion of Christ. I want to be his hands and feet. And that means that when we come in contact with people who have experienced all sorts of trauma and shame and difficulty and condemnation in their lives from society, that we're the hands and feet of Jesus and we love them. Church has got a bad reputation for not being places of love. You know that, don't you? And I think it's at times throughout our history fairly well justified as being the reason why people don't want to come to church. Because sometimes we've been more like the Pharisee in the house, that we wanted to keep things perfect. We don't want things to be changed around. Do you know, if I ever hear someone say, I'm not coming back this place because someone sat in my chair this morning. Do you know, I'm going to say, thank you, don't come back. Because to be the hands and feet of Jesus, we have to be the expression of his love and his compassion. And if you're getting concerned about your seat, if you're getting concerned about your comfort, if you're getting concerned about the convenience for your life, this church is getting a bit busy for me. There's too many people who can never get a seat, don't like it any longer, I have to stand. Stop being a Pharisee. Be the hands and feet of Jesus. I tell you, I will stand out in the street in the service if it meant I could swap with one more person to come in the building. And that's what Jesus does. I have to play in my own heart with my own religion because I like it neat and tidy as well. Do you? Come on, bit of honesty. We like it neat and tidy. And yet, when Jesus turns up, he usually upsets the form. And he stirs things up a bit. And his love often causes a bit of mess. And his love wants to take your mess and he wants to make it new again. And I love that we are called to be people that are full of the love of God. In fact, it's one of our key values here in the church. We've got 3 things. We sang them earlier on. We want to live 100% for God. We want to be all in for him. We want to love everybody. We want to be all out for him. And we want to thrive in the abundant life that Jesus came to bring. That's our vision. That's our heart for you. It's not to have big services. It's not to sing nice songs. We enjoy those things. But our heart is to see you live, love, and thrive in your life. That's our vision. That's why the Church of Jesus exists. And for you, why do you hold back? Well, I began to think of some reasons why someone may not convert their tantalizing TripAdvisor shortlist into reality. I think there's a few reasons why they may not do that. The first one is they may say, I'm not sure it's going to be safe for me to make that journey. I want you to know that there is no safer place that you can be than in the presence of God. There was no safer place on the planet for this lady who had her life turned around than being at the feet of Jesus. The Bible describes God as a refuge, as a shelter, as a rock in the storms. There's no safer place. Another reason why people may not turn their TripAdvisor list into reality is that they don't want to leave where they are. I just like where I am. That's good. But do you know, there's a big world. I love travel. Travel shows me just how wonderful and marvelous and mysterious this world is. And there are times when we have to go through some of the inconvenience of just leaving the comfort of our sofa to discover that. Maybe you don't want to leave where you are. What about if there's a better place? And thirdly, I think this is probably one of the main reasons, I can't afford it. I can't afford to make the trip. Good news for you. Jesus has paid the price. That lady didn't have to bring her alabaster jar of perfume. She didn't have to pay. Jesus loved her. Jesus loves you. Let's pray together.